most people who study abroad, right? Like, there's a lot of people who study abroad in college. A lot of times they pick somewhere sexy like Europe or whatever, but and then they finish their degree and they come back and they pepper it into conversation for the next 20 years. Not to make fun of anyone who's listening.
But before you go anywhere, what is not sexy about Uganda?
Hey everybody, we're back for another episode of Growing Up Christian. I'm Sam, and Casey is not here with me today. He is on vacation with his wife, doing stuff. Whatever stuff that is between them, and they can tell you about it later. I don't know. It's up to them entirely how much they want to talk about all the stuff they're doing. But I am joined here by my buddy Aaron. He was on your fellowship Friday. I think it was our last one, the most recent one, Friday Fellowship 5. So he's here hanging out with me for the next 15, 20 minutes while we introduce our guest, but not yet because we were at a Renaissance fair this week.
Aye, it's true, me lass and ladies.
Ye old Renaissance fair. And I had never been to one. I've been meaning to for quite some time. Aaron, you are a experienced goer at this point, right?
I am. Growing up in Maryland, my parents took me to the Renaissance Fair on the regular. That one's pretty large. I always try to figure out, I can't figure out if the Renaissance Fair is like, what kind of crowd is it? I feel like it's like a NASCAR crowd plus D&D crowd plus LARPing.
Yeah, there's some people there that I didn't expect to see. And then there were some people there that I didn't expect. There were some people who weren't there that I expected not to be. Let's be honest, it was mostly a white crowd.
I thought that to myself. I said, are we celebrating white culture? Is that what's going on here?
Dressing up as characters and watching. Okay, a couple of things that I want to talk about from the thing, so I'm glad I went because like I said, I've been wanting to go for a long time. I know a ton of people who have. You and your wife go regularly, not regularly, but you've gone every year for a little while, right? Okay.
That's correct. So
it's like, I had to check it out and I probably won't do it again. But I feel like that's just because I'm not the right kind. I don't know. Maybe I'm just not the right kind of person for it. Because the whole time I'm there, I'm like, this is cool. I mean, I don't have any other Renaissance fairs to compare it to, but I mean, you walk through like this castle gate entrance in the woods and there's like a build out of a village. I mean, it's all lumber build outs of like an old town. And I know there's Renaissance fairs that are set up, more like fairs, where you would have like pop-ups and tents and stuff like that.
Yeah, small ones.
So this is like you walk into a village that's looks like it would have been from ye olden times. And it looked awesome. As soon as I walked in there, I was like, I think I'm into this. And then, so we saw 4 shows. Three and then the beginning of one. And all of they were good. Like, so the first one was just like fine. It was a little weird, but it was funny enough. The mud dudes. But there was one with like the one with the washing wenches and who pulled guys up from the stage and made everyone feel really uncomfortable. They were absolutely hilarious. I thought they were great. I want to talk about the joust because what do you think about the joust? Are you a joust guy? Were you feeling the joust?
The best part about the joust is it's entirely rehearsed and scripted, and they do like feats of skill where they put the little javelin through the hole a couple times when they ride by. And then each one of the little knights has a little persona. Like they had like Ugandan from Spain. They had Jamie from Mythbusters. At least that's what I looked
dude,
like.
I thought that. I meant to say it. He looked just like Jamie from Mythbusters. He had the beret kind of style hat. Sloppy hat or floppy. I don't know. And then like the giant mustache.
Yeah.
And bald.
But like, the best was the lady from the green team over there.
The green team. I thought
she
the
green?
lady was the yellow team. She was the Yellow Ranger.
But she did good, man. She held her own, and then her horse like tripped up.
I know,
Threw
that was
her off.
crazy.
It was scary.
That was like the only real thing that happened in it. So that's why I was a little like, I legit thought I might be watching a real joust where they like really knock each other off their horse. Of course, that seems really dangerous, which is probably why they don't really do that. And it turned out jousts are basically like WWE of the Renaissance.
Yes, that's basically what it is.
It's like this. It's like like you said, they have their personas, and it's a little scripted. And then someone goes off the rails and like breaks out a sword to start fighting somebody.
And then the one guy like he had him down, but then he like rolled and then grabbed his sword and put it on him. You know, at the very end, like he thought our guy was going to lose, but then he like rolled off the ground and jumped up and had him or whatever. It's awesome. I love it.
They have a couple of like javelin throws that they throw the joust. Is it the joust thing? And then guy rolls out of the way of it, and it's a little weird. But the guy it took me out, man, because it's like here's the joust back and forth, and then there's a little bang on the shield with the jousting stick, and then it's like. The guy throws his weapons in the air, and then
it's
like
because he like throws his one leg over. He like throws his leg over and then falls.
It was funny, and everyone. But I was like, "Oh, this is what I don't get." Like, because I never gave a shit about wrestling. I didn't watch WWE. Like,
I watched it,
and I feel like everyone who's there probably also liked wrestling at some that we're getting into it because they're like
the Renaissance
cheering
fan?
on at the joust they're like cheering on certain characters and then one guy they're like boo.
There's gotta be like a German word, those long German words for this where it's a thing that everybody knows is fake but is still acting like it's not fake and we all are just kind of sitting around watching it. I think of The Bachelor and The Bachelorette. Right?
Yeah.
Even the people in it know it's fake.
But they still roll with it as though it's real.
There's got to be a big, long German word for that, like Herdenfergenergen or whatever. And it's just like an instance where everybody knows what's happening is not real, but we all act like it is to have escapism.
We choose to suspend reality for a brief moment collectively.
Yeah, but I mean, there's that. We do that in movies and theater. It's violence is what it is, and it's violence, and in Bachelor and Bachelorette it's heartbreak, and so everybody knows that conflict, it's that base conflict is fake. But in order to have the story that we want, we have to fake that conflict and violence in order to have the story that we're looking for. And
there is this like I feel like maybe not in The Bachelor, Bachelorette. I've never watched those, but when these live events, I feel like there's that like feeling. There is still that feeling of something could go wrong and it could go out. Like that girl's horse. Her horse, the knees of her horse buckled, and she went straight over the top of that horse and face first into the dirt, and was like on the side, like they were like with a bloody nose, like holding the rag up to her face.
Yeah.
Like, but that could have been really bad, right? That could have gone. And so when it happens, everyone goes from like they're cheering and they're booing and they're all in it. And it's the theater. And then it goes, and I guess that's what it is. It's theater, right? But then when that happens, all of a sudden you hear the gasp collectively around, and then everyone's like waiting to see what happens. But they try to keep the show going, right? Because they don't want that thing to derail it. But then everyone's looking around.
Dude, same thing happened on The Bachelor in Paradise one year.
Okay.
This guy was in the pool and like, I don't know, something happened. They didn't say anything or whatever, but something like went over the line as far as like him being up on her, and like she like told the producers and he had to leave.
Right.
So it's like the same thing. It's the violence and or heartbreak went too far and it disrupted the whole thing.
I forgot because it was like a whole like Me Too thing around that season of The Bachelor, right?
Yeah.
Okay, man. So I feel a little bad because the last show I think could have been cool. He did Fire Eater, man. Eater. He did. It sounds like he like called people, like would like throw knives around people, stuff like that. Like kind of like your circusy kind of shit, and it was cool. But the guy was the worst person I have ever heard talk in my entire life. I hated him.
The German word there is Schadenfreude. That's what that was. It doesn't affect me. I just watch him and go, man, he sucks. I just keep watching. My skin was like crawling. I felt like my insides were
just turning out.
He needed a writer or like a coach or something in that regard.
And so, okay, for the context, he is like, I don't know if anyone listening has watched I Think You Should Leave with Tim Robinson. He's a character that Tim Robinson would have played that you would have fucking hated. You would have been like, oh, it's that cringe comedy type thing. Where he's like,
but I got a great deal on this shirt.
It's like the guy at the party who's like the worst. Oh, that's for anyone. I'm just gonna throw one reference out because if you've heard it, great. If you haven't, watch it. If you watch it for reference. 5 minutes and you don't think it's funny, turn it off. It's not for you. It doesn't change. It's not. It's like that's what it is. And but he's like this guy at a party. He's holding a baby and his baby keeps crying. He tells everybody that every single person there that's like near him. He's like, yeah. Baby's probably crying because he can tell I used to be a total piece of shit. And it's like, everyone's like, oh, okay. Like, you don't know what to do with those kind of people. You're like, oh, yeah. And he just tells everybody. And they're like, can you drop that, though? Like,
and then he goes into detail.
And then he won't let up. And he reminds me of that guy that he's doing there. Like, but back when he was a total piece of shit. And he just has all these jokes about like eating his wife out and being really good at it, but saying it in a way you're just like, he's like, yeah, you guys are great because the last crowd, I had some people walk out because they were offended. Well, now we have a good time because you guys are funny and you get jokes. And you're like, fuck off, dude. Are you in middle school? It was awful. And he was like
a writer
eating fire and shit like that. And he has stuff was awesome. I was so impressed by it. Yeah. And Aaron was the only one who wanted to stay for it. We were there with our wives and they would have. Your wife was very like, this sucks too. She was not feeling it. Jill definitely would have just stayed if everyone wanted to. But as soon as I was like, I can't do it. I'm out. I can't fucking handle this guy. And I guarantee he thought I was walking away because I'm easily offended. And I don't understand his kind of humor. Oh my god, it was just pathetic. I hated it so much.
He walks around telling people that his humor offends people when we're all just leaving because he sucked.
Yes, it's just not funny. It was like I've never watched a comedian bomb, but now I know what it feels like to watch a comedian like bomb. Like that. If you went to an open mic night and that guy came out, oh my god, it would have made you. It makes you, the listener, feel embarrassed and uncomfortable, and everybody knows that feeling when you're watching something.
If you want to feel embarrassed and uncomfortable, go to the Renaissance Fair and get a shipyard pumpkin ale, and the girl asks you if you want a rim job.
Did that happen?
Oh yeah. And it's what it is. They put cinnamon and sugar on the rim.
Yeah, I never heard anyone call it. Well, I mean, outside, I've heard it in unprofessional settings, like, "Oh, you got the rim job, cool." I've never heard someone who's.
Well, I was standing there getting one, and this like middle-aged dude was like, "Do I get the rim job?" And the girl's like, "I don't give rim jobs." And I was like, "Ooh." And the one time I got it, she just goes, "You want the rim?" And I was like, "Yeah." So I guess it's just like, you know, for whoever it wants to be for, I guess.
Yeah.
So after drinking all those, we went out to eat. That was great.
I want to make it clear, I didn't drink Shipyard pumpkin beer because I do hate it. I don't really care if I liked it, that'd be fine.
It's the best pumpkin beer for sure.
People like to shit. No, it's not. People like to shit on pumpkin beer. Like they like to shit on pumpkin spice like every day. I mean, pumpkin. It's people. You should be a little embarrassed if your like identity is wrapped up in your fall pumpkin spice blends. I really can't do, but they didn't have a dude. That was one of the disappointing things there.
Yeah, I kept talking about Killian's.
Selection was trash.
They didn't have any. Somebody mentioned it too. I was in line. Where's the Killian's?
Oh, so they had that last year, but it was basically a hard cider, a mead that they were like out of. I guess they probably like making, because we were there the last weekend.
Yeah,
that they had the last day of the last weekend, I think.
Yeah, it sucks too. I was supposed to interview one of the people from the thing, and she never got back to me. So I'm gonna have to try again next year for my other podcast, Pilgrim's Tigers.
We'll call her out. What's her name? Just kidding.
So we went out to eat. We got to talk about the hotel, man.
Mm-hmm. So, God, do you want to talk about that? We went out to eat, had a great time. But before we went out to eat, though, we went to the hotel to check in, and we were having the worst time checking in. So Aaron and his wife got the hotel room, all the rooms, because Aaron's brother and his wife came with us, and so we all they got the hotel. They took care of the booking, and we just did the whole reimbursement deal. And what happened was like the third party company they booked with sent the money over to the hotel for 2 rooms
and not 3,
but not 3. Yeah, and then they're trying to say that like we'll charge you to Aaron, and even though they were already charged for all the rooms by the third party company, and they're like, you just have to call them and get reimbursed. It was a joke.
It was wild. She said out of her mouth, she said, we ran their credit card and only 2 rooms came up, but I can't get a hold of them. And I was like, I basically said, well, that's a you problem.
Yeah, that's exactly what I said. You started laughing. You're like, that sounds like your problem. Like, why do I have to pay for your
between
problem?
you and them, right? So we're lucky Chad wasn't there, and we're lucky Christy stopped me because my brother would have got after him.
And we're lucky we probably only had like a few drinks at the Renaissance Fair because they were $10 for like a 12-ounce fucking beer. It was ridiculous.
Update on that, by the way, the other company emailed us and said, be on the lookout for your reimbursement in 10 days.
Oh, good. Because we were on Jill ended up calling.
Yeah, she's
you guys,
she's baller like that. Yeah.
Then Christy
cool.
ended up having to talk to him for a while. And at the end of that conversation, it seemed like absolutely nobody was getting a refund for anything.
Yeah. So if you're looking for any sponsors, booking.com is what I use. That's every time we went somewhere, dude. And I chose it or whatever. I've always went through Booking. And the thing is, whenever I go through Booking, though, I never pay up front. That's why I never pay up front. I always pay when I get there.
Oh, yeah.
Booking holds it for you.
Yeah, that's right. That is more normal. What was the third-party website? So
I don't know.
Avoid it.
I forgot. I wish I knew. All the other ones except Booking.com. Booking.com. Give Growing Up Christian a call and Pilgrims Digress. Yeah. Booking.com.
But what was wild is right next to us there was another group.
Oh yeah,
it was 2 like.
Did you hear their problem?
Like, yeah. It was like 2 not older. I don't know. They were like 2 older ladies, I guess. Probably like. Who cares? It doesn't matter. They were just friends. They were 2 older friends. Maybe they were sisters. I don't know. But
they were friends.
Like,
she said that.
Okay. So they're like trying to get their room, and the people are like, okay, so you got the king room. And she's like, no, we booked 2 queens or 2 fulls or something like that. And they're like, no, you booked through a third party company. So that all that does is just hold whatever's available. And she's like, that is not what happened when I booked this room. Like I booked 2 beds where 2 grown adults who want our own beds. And they're like, well, we don't have any other things available. If you want, like you can't reserve that through a third party company. And we all know that's horse shit because that's everyone uses third party companies. So then they're like, the woman was trying to give him a hard time about, oh yeah. She goes, you should have booked through us. And then you would have been able to reserve the room you wanted. She goes, you can't. If you go online to book a room, you can't book through the Holiday Inn. You have to call the Holiday Inn, and nobody does that. If you want people to book through you, make it available to book on your website. And she's like, sorry, there's just really nothing I can do.
It's just one of those things where the market is like, they've got you by the balls, like, or genitalia of your choice. What are you gonna do? Go there and sit down and call the other hotels and see if they got anything open right there?
Yeah, dude. What was nuts for you guys is they were trying to say that the cost you booked the rooms at was too low, and they never book rooms that low. Like, fuck you then. Stop working with these third party websites. I don't know what to tell you. I didn't. That's dumb, dude. But then to top it all off, we woke up the next morning. We're talking about going. Oh, where are we going to get breakfast?
10 a.m.
And it was earlier than 10, wasn't it?
8:10 a.m.
Oh, 8:10. Yeah.
Yeah.
The fire alarm goes off.
I was like, is this serious? What's going on? I was like, man, I did take a hot shower, and I thought we had set off the smoke alarm. And so I was like, oh shit, did I just do the whole
the alarm in our room was not going off, which means it was broken because it was going off in everybody else's rooms.
You're right. That's
if
true.
I was in a dead sleep, I would have slept straight through that.
Yep.
If the building was on fire, I would have definitely died in the middle of the night.
Yep.
Because it wasn't that loud. I mean, hotel rooms are pretty they're soundproofed pretty well. I mean, I'm sure you can hear somebody fucking real hard on the other side of the wall, but other than that, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
But dude, having to leave to the fire alarm going off, I mean,
we were just sitting around like waiting. ready and waiting. So we were like, oh, guess it's time to go.
I guess it was like a leak. So they sprung a leak or some shit in the first floor.
Yeah.
But it was like the hot water tanks. So like Aaron's brother walks into like, and then you don't have to return the hotel keys, like those little like like cards that you tap or whatever. But he was bringing it in because he thought he needed to, and he said he walked into the first floor and like it steamed up his glass, like it was so hot in there, like because the hot water.
Not a good day.
First. And
I'm sure they're still dealing with it now.
Yeah,
I'm sure they're still dealing with it now.
Everyone on the first floor got flooded out with hot water. It was cool. It was a weird experience, but it was a great weekend. I mean, and it was the first one I've had away from, home without my 2 kids, 2 foster kids, 2 dogs, 3 cats, and all my other problems.
Partridge in a pear tree.
Yeah, it was really nice to just. Even if the hotel caught on fire and I had to like stop, drop, roll, and crawl
still
on the ground to avoid the smoke, I probably still would have had a great time.
But you would have still rather have not been watching that fire eater guy.
Yep. Oh yeah, that was. I want to find him. I bet he has an Instagram page or something. Like I don't know how a show. There's got to be another fire eater. There has to be at least one other that can do that.
He just needs a writer. Like that's all I could think of. Was like if he just had somebody that could help him like execute the jokes, like the joke about the cunnilingus. It could have been like packaged a little bit differently and delivered a little bit differently, because he said something about calluses before. Remember?
Yeah.
I was like
I'm cringing already.
I was trying to figure it out. I was like, calluses in his mouth? On his fingers? What's going on?
And then he's like, you guys would have loved it. There's a woman at the last show who stood up and pointed and goes, that's disgusting. I bet he says that at every show too, dude. I bet that never happened.
And I bet you it never happened. Yep.
And he's like, so I said to her, and then said something really dumb. Oh, no, it doesn't matter because there's no setup. So whatever his punchline was doesn't matter.
Yeah,
but
it
was just like he does this whole I said to her, and it was like,
I wonder if he'd do good with a sidekick or a partner, like doing all the talking.
I don't think so.
I think it should be me.
I think no, you don't want to be associated with a guy like that. His personality is just awful. I think that, and it's funny because, dude, I don't think the audience was laughing that. No one was going.
A big part of it. I mean, this is my like OCD sensory thing coming through. Is like that other show on the other side of the stage. It was like a singing show, and it was just like disrupt. It was that sound was cutting through everything in that place, and it was just like I couldn't pay attention to what he was saying anyway. So I don't know.
That definitely helped for me. Like, okay, I have something to be a little distracting. So
that's funny.
But I couldn't. I had to leave. It was just too much for me. But okay, I'm going to go ahead and introduce the guest coming up. It is Phil Wilmot. Phil is actually an old friend of mine, which we get into a little bit. I've known him for a little bit now, quite a while. And I've been excited. I was super excited to talk to him. I've been trying to work this out for a while. He lives in Uganda, which I think we get to that maybe a little late in the conversation. I can't exactly remember, but he's just done a lot of cool shit. He ended up moving over there in college for a bit to study abroad, and then ended up, after a few series of events, permanently relocating there. Been doing a lot of nonviolence resistance organizing, and he's still doing that to some degree today, but a little bit less than it was before. And he's kind of looking to see what's next for him, really. But I mean, he's been such he's one of those friends that you have that's kind of an inspiration that you've learned a lot from, that their life is and their work and their example it meant a lot to me, just to see someone really living out their ethics, their ethos, and at a cost to themselves. And that's not super common in anyone's lives, really, mine, whatever. It's cool to have maintained contact with him and to have seen the things that he's done. So I guess before we cut to our conversation with Phil, you're going to hear an ad from our sponsor. You should definitely check that out, Captain Cecil's. They're great. Their coffee is it's incredible. And I think it'd be worth your while to go ahead and pick some up. Check out Aaron's podcast, Pilgrims Digress, and go ahead and it'd be dope if you guys could leave us a review on iTunes, or maybe just a review, maybe a nice little write up. Well, but 5 stars always dope.
Blurb.
A write up that talks about nice things. If you don't like it, you've been listening for too long and you should have fucking bowed out already.
Get your hopes down.
If you listen to this and then think I should go write a really bad review about it, you're actually a piece of shit. So yeah, don't do shit like that. That's fucking weird. I've never written a bad review for somebody who's just trying to do something cool. So anyway, here's our conversation with Phil Wilmot.
Sam, temperature's dropping, leaves are changing. I think we're well into the fall season.
Yeah, well into it. And the fall season where I live in New England is a premier destination point. It's a lot of people's favorite time of the year here. And it also happens to be my favorite time of the year. And what's better on a crisp fall morning than a great cup of coffee? If you're a coffee enthusiast, you're going to absolutely love Captain Cecil's Coffee Roasters. Captain Cecil's is a Massachusetts-based artisan roastery born out of a love for the sea and a passion for great coffee.
They offer a rotating menu of carefully crafted single-source roasts and blends tailored to the season, from the light, fruitful notes of Empty Gold to the nutty banana bread warmth of Nobska. There's bound to be a cup of Captain Cecil's that's perfect for you.
Empty Gold is honestly an incredible coffee. That and another one of my favorites is 19 Miles at Sea. 19 Miles at Sea is a little on like the kind of caramel nuttier side, and then Empty Gold is a bit on like the fruitier side. And I personally just don't like dark roast. I like a light to medium roast coffee, and those two are fantastic. The huge hits at my house. And we would have friends over and I'd, brew a pot of coffee and everyone raved about it. It's a big hit. I mean, they're just absolutely delicious.
Nobska's definitely been the hit at my house. We absolutely love it. On top of great coffee, Captain Cecil's is committed to caring for the beautiful northeastern shore that they love so much. 10% of all sales go to organizations like the American Lighthouse Foundation, who ensure the preservation of the historic New England coastline.
So if you're ready to welcome that autumn breeze with a warm cup of Captain Cecil's, visit CaptainCecilsCoffee.com. Enter the promo code GrowingUpChristian at checkout to receive 10% off your first order and free shipping on orders over $50. That's CaptainCecils.com, promo code GrowingUpChristian. Hey everybody, welcome back. We are here with Phil Wilmot. He is not only a friend of mine, but someone who has a very fast on the podcast for a while. We've done a lot of fellowship Fridays and had some people that we've known college and stuff. But one of the things that's particularly neat about Phil is he's someone who should be on people's podcasts, regardless of whether or not they know him or not, because he has done a lot of interesting things, had a lot of wild experiences, and for some good, some bad. But I guess I'll just kick us off here with how Phil and I met, because I think it's a fun story. And so Phil and I we met at a music festival in high school. I was probably like 17. Phil, I think you're a little bit younger than me, right?
Yeah, I think.
A couple of years, maybe. I don't know. Age doesn't matter at the point.
But how old are you two?
Yeah, I know. We could just say.
We could sort this out.
Yeah. Crunch some numbers live for everyone.
I'm a Virgo. I just turned 31.
Okay, 33. So yeah, just a little bit of a difference. But anyway, so meet at Purple Door. It's all like the heavy music shit that we've talked about. Casey and I came up, and we didn't really we stayed in touch because of MySpace and stuff like that, because you just added everybody on MySpace back then. And then after you get rid of MySpace, you lose touch with a lot of people, as how things go. And I kind of lost touch with Phil, and it was a good few years later. I was at Liberty in college, and a friend of mine said, "Hey, my friend Phil's coming to visit, and I think you guys would get along. Like, you should come hang out when Phil's here." And then I found out that this was the Phil Wilmot that I had met at a music festival 5-6 years prior that I had completely lost touch with. So, and it was ever since then that we kind of stayed in touch after that. So that's a bit of potentially divine serendipity, if not just general serendipity.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess like you would think it's a small world, but then you realize like, you're both from the East Coast, you're both really into metal, and you're both evangelicals. So, maybe it wasn't actually that, like amazing that we kind of met, but it felt amazing for sure.
Right. It's almost guaranteed that we all knew, or if we didn't go ourselves, all knew people who were going to Liberty University.
So how at the music festival did you guys meet? Did you was there like a hole in the bathroom stall or?
Yeah.
That's a great question, because how we met was really, really cool. We were, so Purple Door is like a heavy music, Christian heavy music festival in my home state of Pennsylvania. Sam came down from Mass many, many hours. And, getting into the festival, there was like a 3-4 hour traffic jam. And so everybody just kind of swung their doors open and started chatting each other up. And Sam liked my Comeback Kid shirt.
That's right. Holy shit. I actually forgot about that. I forgot about the traffic jam leading because then I actually my first recollection of it was meeting inside. And now I realize that that's only because we had met prior. Because we didn't just strike up conversations with one of the hundreds of people at this festival. I actually forgot about that part of the story. So that's super funny.
So it was like a hey kid, nice shirt.
Yeah. Which is like how friendships got started back then.
Yeah, it was. I was part of like before there was like social media, there was like blogs and forums and stuff like that, right? And I was part of one where we would just like recycle our shirts, for whatever cool band. We would try to, buy like rare shirts just directly from individuals, and you just trust them that you send them the money and it's going to show up at your doorstep.
That's right.
Quite a different world.
That's hilarious. So Phil, why don't you go ahead and kind of give us a brief overview of what I know you grew up evangelical, and also in the South. I guess that qualifies as the South. I don't remember if you were above or below, but it kind of blends together around Pennsylvania.
Yeah. So technically I grew up north of the Mason-Dixon line in the North, but culturally it was in the South. It was particularly York County, Pennsylvania. Right now it has some of the most, the highest rates of COVID. It's very historically racist. When my parents moved to town when I was 4. So one of the stories that they often share is that, my dad picks up this, scrappy construction job or some kind of side gig under the table. And one of his colleagues says hey, you're new in town. Are you going to join the Klan? So this was just like an assumption, you've moved to Hanover, York County, Pennsylvania. You join the KKK if you're white, and most people are white.
Wow.
So I kind of grew up I grew up very close to all this kind of stuff. And my parents are not Klan members, thankfully.
So you're gonna have to clear that one up for the audience. They're gonna want to know.
Yeah, just let me put that. Yeah, let me just at least give them that little tiny credit of not being Klan members. We can talk about, passive racism and anti-racism and deconstructing, white privilege and white supremacy and all that. But that was very shocking to them. I think they weren't really aware that this was, a part of the world where this is so common. I guess they were kind of blissfully naive. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I was definitely told that story more than once. Grew up in a church that was evangelical, fundamentalist evangelical, fundagelical, something like that. It was an evangelical free church. headed by an old white man with a lot of, white families that had been there for who knows how long.
And ironically,
one of
a
those
lack
kind
of freedom.
Sorry, what do you mean?
No, just you said evangelical.
Oh, evangelical free church.
And
Yeah,
there's ironically
exactly.
a lack of freedom.
Yeah. It's like so stoic, so like rigid. The culture of church is show up and smile, put on your best face, wear a collar. My dad's rule was that his boys are not allowed to have hair touching their eyebrows, ears, or necks. So I got clever about that as I grew up, and I got a mohawk, fit all of his rules. So as a kid, I was like, there was nobody in church my age. So, I was always just sort of like, why the hell do I have to go to church on Sunday and wear a turtleneck and sit and listen to boring music when I could be listening to awesome music? Why do I have to go and sing with the younger kids in Sunday school, or, pretend to care about the Bible with, older kids? It was just a bad experience for me. So I did grow up evangelical and like sort of surrounded by all these boring people, and didn't really necessarily connect with their values, but, I was taught that these are the correct values. They're right. They're what get you to heaven, these are boxes that you have to tick in life. So
did you believe that? Then did you believe?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Yeah,
you have that
so
Christian punk mentality sometimes of kids who grow up there, and they're like, I don't buy it, but you kind of toe the line for a bit. So I wasn't sure what your level of.
Well, no, I think maybe what kind of shocks me sometimes is that when I reflect on, my youngest years, like the real scandal is like how obedient I was, I always found ways to kind of like conform to the rules and make sure I was doing things right, but sort of like a little bit on my own terms. I don't think I got like openly, defiant, rebellious, or whatever until I was really in college. But, high school years, like, go to school, work hard in school, go to church, go to youth group, do all those things.
Yeah.
I had my, minimum wage dishwashing jobs in the evening. So I think with some exceptions, like I think I was like a really good, Christian upright kid.
Yeah. So you went to Christian college, and that's when things started changing.
Yeah, I went to Messiah University, also in central Pennsylvania, closer to Harrisburg. And I studied theology. And later on, I picked up peace and conflict studies. It was an interesting school. I think I still think it's a good school. It comes from like the Brethren in Christ and Anabaptist traditions. So that was very different in terms of values and culture from, the kind of evangelical community that had raised me. Yeah.
Anabaptist is like, one of their things is nonviolence, right? Is that an Anabaptist belief, or is that just some Anabaptist?
Yeah, that's very central to Anabaptist values. So they believe in, religion as community. They believe in, sort of like ethics, and central to that is like the Sermon on the Mount and the Gospels, as opposed to, fucking, whatever Leviticus or whatever bullshit I was raised on. And then nonviolence is kind of like one of those other core pillars, traditions, beliefs.
Which is a funny thing to hear when you grow up evangelical. Like I remember the first time I was presented with the concept of Christian nonviolence. Oh wait, so you're saying that you shouldn't join the military, and that self-defense killings? It throws all like a whole wrench in the works of
totally, absolutely, it does. I think I hadn't realized until my university days, like how deeply ingrained like the white settler narrative is with like nationalism and American exceptionalism and all that stuff, combined with militarism and violence. Like I never really kind of put these things together until not only I got exposed to Anabaptism. I'm not an Anabaptist, but it did really influence me. I'm not a Christian either. But like I was at my mom's place a few years back, and I was kind of like digging around in the attic for like old stuff just to kind of like find what memories I could. And I came across this Awana handbook. I was like raised in Awana. My first kiss was in a place called Cubby Cove, which was like, deep in the the basement of our church. And like I was raised like memorizing Bible verses that didn't really mean anything to me, but it was important to memorize them. So I found this old Awana handbook, and I'm just like curious. I had already for several years been on my path of deconstruction and all that, and I opened the first page, and like the first page was about it was like this Columbus kind of narrative, like we arrived in America, God bless America, America is God's nation. Like before it said anything about like Christian beliefs or Bible or the Bible or anything like that. That was the first thing. And I remember thinking like, this book is for like 6-year-olds, this is like for very, very young children. Like it wasn't like a high school level one. It was like one of the younger ones, and it had the pictures of the boats and everything. So, this was like, very much the narrative that I was like, spoon-fed growing up, intentionally or not. And I think, getting older and having the opportunity to challenge those, deeply embedded indoctrinations, has been good. Like I often kind of like think about it in terms of like, the attitudes that are on display during like family reunions and like being taken to meet family. And, they have a similar narrative. It's like, we come from the Wilmot family, or, such and such a people, and we came over on the Mayflower, and we're so important, and we've always been a Christian family. And, there's this sort of like air of like, whatever we got going on in our lives, we know that we're like the in group, and we come together every year to kind of celebrate that we're the in group, not really care about each other, but to kind of like know that we are chosen in a way.
That's super interesting. Wait, you're telling me for real that like your family, or maybe it's more of a myth, but your family heritage goes back to the Mayflower, or is that just like, was that hyperbole of some sort?
That's the story. Yeah. No, that's wow. Very much the literal story that we are told. Yeah.
We had just spoken with someone recently for an episode who was Mormon, and one of the conversations we had was how it seems somewhat common for Mormons to go say how far back like their generational Mormonism is, and how I had never actually heard of anyone in where I grew up, how I grew up. No one ever talked about how many generations back they were Christian or anything like that, but that's what's super funny about you mentioning it now, is this is the actual first time I've heard someone mention their family lineage kind of taking that as like a badge of honor. Like, this is how far back our lineage goes. This is how far back our Christianity goes. So that's really funny timing, because I'm new to that concept within Christianity.
I think that stuff has always been a big part of, I don't know, any group. I mean, it's how you kept the tribe knit together, back when that was critical, right? It wasn't all about loving each other and engaging each other in a relational way. In some cases, it was more like, hey, you're a part of the group sticks together. When the group has a problem, you jump in and you take part and stuff. And I feel like right now, like especially as the society, like globalization and stuff takes over, it's like less and less important and more problematic to keep thinking in those terms, whether you're talking about, your religious affiliation or your family heritage or whatever it is, whatever thing you've incorporated into your identity. Like, it's cool to respect your heritage, and it's interesting and fun to learn about, and I think it's good to take pride in that stuff to some extent, but to do so in a way that causes problems between you and people outside your group, I think is where we're running into trouble now. I don't know. Maybe I'm rambling, but
there's definitely an extent to which, like, saying that you're the it thing becomes exclusive or oppressive to others. And I think, especially if you came over on the Mayflower, there's kind of a responsibility to, like, question your family history, even if you can't get to the bottom of everything, to, like, recognize, like, the privileges that you have, to work to undo injustice and to build up a more just world. Like, you have, like, more power because of what's been handed to you. And I think also, like, inheritance, like, essentially capitalism, multi-generational wealth is, like, one of these things that sort of does the work of pride for us, so we can kind of, like, maintain this kind of, like, self-righteousness, especially in sort of, like, today's, especially for Americans, I think that, kind of divested historically from this whole, I'm part of the royal family, the queen, yada, yada, yada. Like, Americans aren't really into that. They think of themselves as these, like, rugged individuals. So they don't want to, like, point to, my father did this and therefore I am important. But I think, basically, like, the privileges and wealth that are inherited across generations does that work and kind of creates this veneer of morality, and not enough people really deconstruct that.
So you're saying, like, the inheritance meaning, like, because of your family and their social status or economic status or whatever, like, you grew up a certain way and you got to live a certain lifestyle and stuff growing up, and that in and of itself separates you from, like, consciously or subconsciously, like, that separates you from other types of people.
Yes. And it also allows you to pretend that you are not separate, even when you do have those powers and privileges over others. Those things, it's like we can kind of willfully kind of just believe that we live in this vacuum. Everything else is even. We didn't do anything wrong as individuals, so therefore there's not this kind of, like, responsibility. I mean, it's going to look different for each person, and I think we really have to, like, recognize, like, that we are, like, the individual is an abstraction. The individual is fundamentally an abstraction. We are parts of something. We are part of a tree. We are part of a community. We are part of a people, many peoples. We are part of a history. We're part of an economy. And I think the narratives that Americans in particular are given make it very easy for them to divorce themselves from that reality, that they're tied to other things. And even now during this pandemic, of course, like, the polarization of society is really going through the roof. We're more and more able to kind of, insulate ourselves against the responsibility of being part of something that's more than ourselves. That's why people can't have hard conversations face to face. They'll create, like, an alias and troll some people on Twitter or whatever.
Yeah, that heavily resonates. I feel like that's very very much part of the zeitgeist of making. I mean, just people in general having with people about them, which really has been happening. Has been growing since people, especially millennials and Gen Zers, have been having faith shifts and things like that. Even more challenging conversations to have than political ones, which is interesting. But they're
And
often not had. Like people are just not having it. It's kind of like bubbling.
that is also a lot of words to say. I'm sorry, I joined the clan, Phil.
Yeah.
Mm.
It's like,
I'm sure there are many people that would feel heavily inconvenienced to to say something that simple, and go through life with this fragility, that to say something like that, I know what you're saying is kind of like shorthand for maybe the bigger picture, but it is kind of like amazing to me how people will be so protective or defensive of the most minor aspects of their privilege.
I think that, well, first off, I feel like I've only really started hearing conversations about privilege in the past couple of years here. So I think it's a new concept to a lot of people. And I feel like there's a lot of conversation about like recognizing privilege, which is obviously, I mean, that's first step, right? It's the first thing you got to do is understand the ways in which you are advantaged over other people. I think where people, like, part of the reason that people avoid recognizing it or even having conversations about recognizing it is because they don't know what what's the responsibility beyond that. Like, nobody really talks. Everything that people talk about is about recognizing your privilege, but like, if you do, like, you recognize that privilege, like, what do you do with it from there? I feel like people don't talk about like, okay, well, this is where you're at, and you notice those things, about now what? Like, now what are you going to do with that to lessen the effects of that privilege? And I feel like that's the thing that people get nervous about, and so they're just like, no, not going to do it. Not going there. Not going to delve into that.
It feels like it falls into the category often of some, not everyone, but there is a large enough group of people, and we understand this sentiment because it's the culture we came from, of just wanting you to say the right things and believe the right things. So if you can just get someone to admit the truth about privilege, then great. But the people who haven't are the enemy, and those are the ones you need to sway. And when you're saying like the conversation about what the implications of that are is what's missing, it's almost, it kind of reminds me of the implications of what it meant to be Christian growing up. It's like there's all these conversations about saying I believe in Jesus Christ as my personal Lord and Savior, and that Jesus was born of a virgin, and that he died and rose, and that he saved us from our sins, and we're all going to hell if we don't just admit that that's the truth. And then you look at how it informs people's lives, and it doesn't do much. I feel like they're having the same problem on any other side of roast conversations. Let's get you to admit the right thing. So in that sense, it's that you have privilege, but the conversation about the implications of how it's supposed to impact your life and what's required of you based on what you've admitted to as the truth is often lost.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of parallels there.
What do you think of that, Phil?
Well, I'll preface the way that I want to respond by saying that I don't care or give special privilege to any of your listeners that follow Jesus versus any other source of wisdom or inspiration. But since we're talking about growing up Christian,
right?
I think there are two sort of classic examples from Jesus's life that come to mind, and one goes back to that sort of like genealogy conversation, which is like Jesus basically said you have to be born again, and what he's saying when he says that, like in historical socio-political context, is you must renounce this pride in your lineage. So there's this like renunciation of privilege. You're not automatically in the in group because you think you're better than others, and your ancestors have done ABCD, therefore you're the it thing. There's actually this conversion experience. There's this renunciation, this withdrawal from the institution that you feel so special to be a part of. But then there's also this leveraging of privilege those at the margins, those who are oppressed. Another example might be, this idea of like the rich man not finding his personal freedom or liberation without renouncing wealth.
Mhm.
That pops up in the Gospels as well. I don't want the conversation to go in this direction of like, what is the right thing or responsible thing to do with your privilege only. I mean, ethics are important and all that, but there's also this aspect of what liberates me. Where do I find my humanity? Is it really in, continuing to amass land, taking out loans, setting up a certain kind of life for my offspring, without any critical reflection on like who does this affect? And I also want to be careful of I'm not trying to scandalize people that are just getting by in life.
Sure.
Because it is a fraction of the 1% that really oppress all of us. But within the 99%, we have to also discover our humanity together. That's the path. That's like the meaning, the quest of the human experience, is to discover your humanity, your freedom, your liberation. And I don't think like we really get there by living in a vacuum and saying, yes, I tick the boxes. I guess maybe the argument is more fundamental. Like, I think, our freedom, our liberation, a Christian might say being saved. I think it happens in this life. Other Christians would say, whatever happens in this life, just bear it. As long as you're, sort of swallowing it well, you'll end up in the correct hereafter. So I guess we might not agree on that fundamental level, myself and others. But if you do accept that there's some kind of meaning and purpose and joy and freedom and liberation in this life, like it has to be bound up with the experiences of other people.
Yeah. To your point about not wanting to scandalize people who are just trying to make a way for themselves in this life, I'm just going to emphasize that's not what you're doing, because that's essentially what I've done, and we're friends, and I don't feel like you're doing that, even when you call it. Just pointing that out. But I think it is a good way to kind of move into like what you do and why you do it. For the listeners, we've tried to do this call multiple times, and we've had a lot of difficulty because time difference and internet connection. It can be a problem because we're talking to Phil from Uganda. And what brings a white Southern evangelical to Uganda? Because that's not the path that everybody takes, but that's where you kind of found what gives you drive and purpose in this life. And I think that started when you were at Messiah. Is that right?
Yeah. So when I went to Messiah the first semester, I was like, it is so damn cold here. I need to get the hell out of central Pennsylvania. I don't understand. Like, my parents grew up in upstate New York, the coldest parts of the continental US. And, I was raised, with blizzards every now and then. And I was always that kid that's like, I'll go outside maybe for 5 minutes, throw a few snowballs, and then I'm going to run back inside for my hot chocolate. I never liked the cold. And I was on campus. It was really windy. I was like working this like early morning campus job, where I would walk the whole way across, diagonally across the extreme ends of campus at 6 a.m. every morning to go and sweep. And I was just, I was getting like depressed, and I was like, I got to get out of here. So I went to like our study abroad office on campus, and I looked at all the pictures, and I saw the equator, and the equator ran right through Uganda. And I was like, okay, that must be like a more conducive climate for my happiness. And so filled out the paperwork, went to Uganda my second year of university, and through a bizarre, or I don't know what the right word is, through a series of events. In any case, I ended up here. That wasn't really the plan, but life has led me here. And so that was in 2009. So I've been here about 12 years.
Wow, I think that's hilarious. I honestly thought that there was something more specific that brought you there other than just not wanting to be cold.
I mean, that was the preliminary motivation. And then, I saw like some photos that students had taken. I don't know what the thing was, that like sold me on it. It seemed, I guess different. I guess I was looking for something different,
Mm-hmm.
than my campus experience that particular semester.
So you were in Uganda. You end up there. I know you come back here and there while you're in school, but that while you were there, you did start kind of solidifying that that's where you would end up on a more permanent basis. So, and then we'll kind of get into the details, but because you eventually worked to form Solidarity Uganda, a nonprofit, and we'll hear more about that, I guess, a little bit later. But kind of like, how did things move in that direction for you? How did you find that as Uganda as a more permanent place itself?
Yeah. So, it was a combination of things. One, I stayed off campus with a family and really like appreciated that experience. I think it really helped me find certain aspects of myself and my spirituality and my, sort of like preferred social arrangements and that kind of stuff. I started dating someone. We eventually had 2 kids. The relationship didn't work out. But my kids are still in Uganda. I have a new relationship here. I'm married here. And I was also, as I said, I was studying theology. And so I had to do kind of like a practicum. And I, at the same time, had kind of like started this small youth commune, kind of like in an old Episcopal church in Harrisburg. And I think through that experience, I was just like, I really don't want to learn from like one of these old geezers that just like should not be leading a community. At least, I mean, there are many, amazing faith leaders in Harrisburg. The ones that I was in proximity to are not included in that category, with maybe the exception of 1 or 2. But, I was really looking for something that would challenge me. And so I did an internship with the Church of Uganda in northern Uganda. I mean, I don't know how much you want to go into that, but I think through that experience was enlightening. It also, kind of showed me that you really don't fit here, Phil. This isn't for you. And if you keep going down this path, like it's going to suppress your happiness and also what you have to offer.
What do you mean by that? Because it sounds like, so obviously at this point in your life, you are still in school. You're looking at your like spiritual growth or your spirituality through a Christian lens still. And when you say you're at the Church of Uganda and you realize that this isn't going to work for you and a good fit, if you kind of continue on that path, is that still with that like evangelical lens that you're talking about, and that's what's not working? What is it? Just real, I guess, kind of quickly, I guess, or as long as you want, don't worry about it. Speak to just what that means to you, like why it didn't feel like it might work.
Oh yeah, sure. So, well, I was so open to all kinds of spiritual influence, even before going to Uganda. I think, like leaving home and going off to university and questioning things, I was really ready for it. I wanted something like that, for my own growth. And, I was kind of like easing myself into it with, I was reading all kinds of holy books and, theology and sociology from different religious perspectives from around the world. I think, I was also gravitating, more toward radical politics, which is also kind of a religion of its own sometimes. And I kind of found a bit of a growing identity there. And so I brought all of these influences into my, experience with the Church of Uganda, and found that essentially what the Church of Uganda is an extension of colonial religion. No surprise, shouldn't have been a surprise to me. But I guess I was still holding out. At that point, I wasn't much of an evangelical, but I was at least still identifying as a Christian, very consciously in my daily life, trying to grow as a Christian. And I think if I'm to pick a moment that sort of like settled it for me, it's probably when I was invited to, there was a very wealthy church member where I was serving, and he invited me with like some of the bigger clergy in the diocese to attend a house opening ceremony for his new mansion. And all these clerics, first of all, it rubbed me the wrong way, but I'm like, okay, I'm here to learn, like I'm a student, like I'm here to learn, I'm here to follow along, and always give benefit of doubt until I have judgments and lines that I can't cross, So I attended this thing, and I basically, through that experience, like I realized that, like, okay, if I stay on this path, the maximum possible, peak will be that I become an old person. I'm still wearing this damn collar, saying the same damn things, year after year to appease somebody that's above me. And so that the community can look at me and clap, after I've made a speech. And fundamentally, I was like more interested in social change and that kind of stuff. And I'm like, it just won't happen here. Like, the church is not a vehicle for that. And that's not to say the church hasn't been a vehicle for that in sub-Saharan Africa. It has. But I think mostly, by and large, that heyday is well past. And, the institution, actually just like church in general, regardless of like its level of institutionality in Uganda in particular, is something that does entrench the status quo, of which I'm very disillusioned with it. So I think, I kind of made a decision informally in that moment, but then, I had to kind of like take several months to be like, was I really, sober minded when I was processing that? And eventually I was like, yeah, no way, I'm out. I can't do this.
It is tough. Like, I don't know. I feel like there's there's a lot of people in all different types of situations that look at that same prospect. And, everybody's on a track towards something. And when your track becomes too defined, I think some people take comfort in that and other people don't, because I kind of feel the same thing sometimes, in my professional life, is like I'm looking at it and I'm like, okay, well, here is the next clear iteration of what that looks like. And here's the cap. And I just don't know if that's going to work for me. Like, do I want to do that? Do I want to be in this person's shoes doing what they're doing 15 years from now? And I don't know. That I totally resonate with that feeling that you're describing, of just like, no, I do not. That's not where I want to be 2 decades from now,
Yeah, totally. Back to the conversation of, privilege. I mean, it's great if you can say like, this has no meaning or purpose for me, therefore I'm going to do this other thing. Just, acknowledging that not everybody really has that choice. And sometimes, you play with the hand that you're dealt, and you just gotta, survive or make the best of it. I think in my situation, like I did grow up like, poorer than a lot of my neighbors. And I think, having to, dishwash on minimum wage for all these years and like do these scrappy jobs and like, try to put myself through like a fucking terribly expensive, like liberal arts, private Christian college, like all that stuff, like at least gave me some level of, I did have to play with the hand that I was dealt, but definitely like at some point I was like, I got to push back as well. I can't just, keep following this path. You can end up living in servitude to the path that's laid out for you, and that's definitely not something that I want for anybody that I love. So I don't want it for myself either.
Which is, so, I mean, if you end up, most people who study abroad, right? Like there's a lot of people who study abroad in college. A lot of times they pick somewhere sexy like Europe or whatever, but and then they finish their degree and they come back and they pepper it into conversation for the next 20 years. Not to make fun of anyone who's listening.
But before you go anywhere, what is not sexy about Uganda?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. But Europe is the first thing that came to mind about something that's sexy, because people are 16 and they drink and smoke cigarettes. But from those long sticks, they put their cigarette into that long, like Cruella de Vil stick, and they smoke. I don't know. Europe is what people think of when they think sexy places to go. But it's
the second time I heard about Cruella de Vil today for some reason.
Oh, you're welcome.
It must be the harvest moon. I don't know.
But you stayed. You didn't so you came to this awakening there that you didn't want to just continue on a trajectory, and instead of doing that back home where you could have found another way to not do that, like you stayed. And so what compelled you there? Why did you gravitate towards Uganda in such a strong way?
I don't know. And I don't think like it's, I mean, there is an aspect to which like, you have a relationship with a place. And I think one thing that's lost is like, especially for, people that have in their ancestry, like white settler colonialism, manifest destiny attitudes, we like, I'm including myself in that category by when I say we have kind of lost this sense of place identity, unless it kind of makes us allows us to oppress others and still feel good about ourselves. So, I don't want to like completely say that. Of course, like every place is his place now. You shoot a rocket dick into the sky and you just assume that, the cosmos are yours. I don't know what, anyway, we can go into that for a long time. So I do, feel a sense of pride, of like, of home, of commitment, community, identity. When people talk about Uganda, that's not to say I don't feel it, when they talk about Harrisburg, especially where I spent quite a bit of time. I didn't stay in Uganda for some years. Like I came back to Pennsylvania and, I was an organizer in Harrisburg and, I was a student and did all these kind of like blue collar jobs and all that kind of stuff. And at some point I was just like, this isn't the life for me. Like, am I just going to keep hustling, like working my way up the nonprofit, it's not even a ladder. Like there's really nowhere to climb, it's, you're just kind of like in this, do-gooder kind of economy or whatever, and doesn't really make that much of an impact. And, I think, having the politics that I had, I was very eager to know that I could make a difference. And at that point in my life, like, and definitely, like, I'm committed also to making a difference, in social change and political struggle in my home state as well. Recently, we had a kind of an action where we interrupted in Harrisburg this meeting by Republicans and some of their Democrat friends. It was a little meeting about in the State House about why pipelines have both economic and environmental benefits. It's just like a bullshit event. So I'm still like engaged in these things as well, even when I'm physically removed. But I think I felt like it was, to be honest, is like a bit of an opportunistic choice. Like I felt like I had comrades and friends. We were deeply engaged in a political struggle against Uganda's dictator. So I didn't want to just kind of like give up on that. I felt like I had a role to play. I could offer solidarity and support in different ways that like I was trying really hard to offer in central Pennsylvania as well. And I just couldn't. I felt like I wasn't getting a foothold, and so I don't know. I can't necessarily point to one thing. I guess I'm trying to work it out as I talk here. But I did with a few other folks, 5 Ugandans and then a fellow American. We started Solidarity Uganda to kind of like organize with different rural communities, especially in Uganda, to resist the military dictatorship and the multinationals and private companies from outside of Africa that continue to make people's lives really difficult and frustrating. So we started this organization some years back, and work-wise, that was kind of like what I was like wrapped up in for quite a number of years. And I'm still I'm not directly involved anymore, but I'm adjacent to a few of their undertakings, and it's really become an amazing, very diverse group of East Africans that are fighting for their liberation.
Who's the dictator that you were talking about, and like, can you tell us a little bit about like what type of government you were opposing and what you guys were doing to do that?
Yeah. So, where it's always hard to know where to begin, because I almost don't want to start with this dictator, even though he's been in power for coming to 4 decades.
Whoa.
It's been almost 4 decades. Basically, like the colonial government from the UK came to Uganda, and around 1900 was when a lot of the colonial efforts were really systematizing, and Uganda is essentially a land grab. There was nothing called Uganda before before Europe came in and divided up Africa. There were different nations and kingdoms essentially, and so like the colonization grouped all of these groups under something fictitious called Uganda. And I don't know if I'm doing this narrative justice, because I'm probably not the one to really tell the history, but essentially what happened was that one of those kingdoms was used to, not only one, but one especially, was used to colonize and co-opt other kingdoms and nations from across these lands. And eventually, like this partnership between the colonial occupation and some of these kingdoms that they were more friendly with, basically resulted in this sort of emerging government that was eventually handed over to those that had been friendly to the British. So there are many African nations, countries, nations, kingdoms that really struggled and resisted to get their independence. That did happen, yes, in some parts of Uganda, but maybe not to the same kind of like systematic scale as elsewhere in some parts of Africa. So you have this sort of hegemony whereby the rulers that were kind of like left in power now also had economic ties, social ties, etc., to the former colonial government, and up till today still have those ties in the form of, financial policies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I don't want to kind of like bore listeners with all that.
So they basically they divided it up by lines on a map that didn't take into account the different groups of people living in that area, and then co-opted one or several of the groups there, and through them subjugated the rest, sort of set up a puppet government with like these people who they've used to that end in charge of things. And even now that their colonial ties are dissolved, so in some ways the echoes of that are still there. I mean, and these people who are descendants of the ones that had kind of took the reins from the British government still have ties to institutions and things in the UK that allow them to continue to stay on top. Is that oversimplifying?
Well, yeah, but also I'm oversimplifying. And we are, a few like ignorant white dudes, trying to construct a somewhat fair assessment of what happened within a short period of time. But there were these different regimes that ruled politically in Uganda from 62 onward, and basically, like the person who's currently in power, Yoweri Museveni, went armed to the bush and got this popular support from the people because he said African leaders stay too long in power. And there are sort of like these historical, you can look it up on YouTube, and these kind of like speeches that he gave and all this kind of stuff, being young and charismatic and ready to kind of like fight in this democratic revolution and this kind of stuff. So turns out what he did was like kill a shitload of people.
Classic
many. Yeah. I mean, and also very much learned and taught from, colonial from imperialism, from the global North's imperialism. So, he killed a bunch of people, got into power, that was in the mid 80s, and now he's still in power, having said African leaders stay too long in power. So, it's this, things have regressed. He was also a student of, political science, basically. And this was the late 80s. So a lot of the neoliberal economic policies were really coming around globally. And although he kind of had this sort of communist rhetoric when he was rising to power, like he saw that it was more opportunistic to, basically privatize everything that could be privatized, and, bring in a lot of private business to do the things that the state should be doing, or that the state had done in the past. And, slowly, year by year, society started to crumble. He crushed down, trade unions, cooperatives, just basically made life hard for farmers, for workers, for students, for women, and, progressively over the years, things have just gotten quite bad. Some things have improved, no credit to him, but some things have improved. Others have really regressed. And essentially what it has devolved into is a military dictatorship. Why do I say that? Because any dissent is suppressed, even very modest dissent. If you go and take like a placard or a sign and go out to the road, and tape your mouth, it's a silent protest or something, you will be thrown in jail. You will be subjected to kangaroo courts, et cetera, et cetera. So it's been rough. He's kind of acted as sort of like a military wing for the Western powers, especially the U.S. So if the U.S. has a military mission in Africa, it might contract the military, the Ugandan military, the UPDF, or private, sort of like contractor fighters from Uganda. So it's essentially an informal trade, since a lot of your listeners are probably from the States, like it's worth saying that, there is basically an informal arrangement between the government of the US and the government of Uganda, where as long as Museveni's military does the dirty work, then, foreign aid, etc., can come flowing in. He can embezzle, the US will turn a blind eye to widespread corruption. There was a riot against Museveni and in favor of one of the kingdom's kings in 2010, 2011. I'm not remembering the right year. Which it was basically like the week after I first came to Uganda, and in the town where I was attending school, there were these riots, and after those riots, the European and North American powers get together and they discuss, okay, we want stability, therefore let's invest in crowd control, let's invest in anti-riot gear, let's invest in tear gas, let's support the Uganda government in torture interrogation methods. So the past decade has basically been these investments in stabilizing the dictatorship in Uganda. This is not new, of course, for like U.S. foreign policy. It's kind of like the norm. Yeah. There are, good and bad dictators, quote unquote, for the deep state, the U.S. deep state. But it had really, really entrenched Museveni's rule over the past few years, and people have been resisting him. There have been some victories against the oppression, some very big victories even. But he's still in power, and the pandemic has helped him out a lot.
What is like resistance to, because you mentioned that a couple of times, like, you were involved in resistance against the regime or whatever. What does that look like? Like, what if protesting and stuff is so closely controlled, like what can you do?
Yeah, that you're asking a question or pointing out a problem that I've tried to really put my life into, and also sort of tangential to that, try to make a living out of answering that question with folks. So a lot can be done. I mean, there are really three kind of like key ingredients for successful resistance, and just kind of be nerdy for a second. One,
definitely take it away. I want to hear your nerdiness on this.
One is unity across diversity. So, are you finding groups, communities, people, individuals, institutions that share a common goal with you? Are you uniting with them? Are you building those relationships? Are you working together? Are you building your numbers, across people that are affected by the same enemy, essentially? The second thing is strategic planning. So, if you remember, when Mubarak fell in Egypt, like the kind of mainstream media narrative was like, oh, this whole thing happened in a few weeks. Who would have thought that Tahrir Square would bring down, this dictator? Mm-hmm. But if you actually, do more research, you'll find that there was tons and tons of like organizing happening on the ground, people having all those boring meetings, people planning together, waiting for that serendipitous moment, ready to kind of like pull the trigger when the opportunities arise, etc. So there's the unity amidst diversity. There's the strategic planning, and then there's and this is a debated one, but they call it nonviolent discipline. I call it nonviolent strategy. Although like historically, like violence sometimes can like help a resistance struggle. But generally where movements are nonviolent, they attract broader participation. Persons with disabilities participate, children participate, elders, women, et cetera, whereas if you have a strictly violent guerrilla uprising of sorts, it's usually young, able-bodied men that go to the struggle, and it's often not a critical enough mass, and it's often fought or suppressed with the same tools that they try to use, but the opponent has a greater quantity and more skill with those tools, with weapons, with military strategy and training. The U.S. trains some of the dictator's henchmen. I lived in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, which has the U.S. Army War College, which has trained Ugandan military leaders. There's WINSEC in Georgia that has trained all kinds of dictators around the world, their military people. So if you're going up against the big guns, like you have to have a strategy, and that strategy is really hard to build, and it's not just created front loaded out of a vacuum. We created the strategy, now we apply it. It's always evolving because of how much the terrain is shifting. There are always arrests, there's always suppression, there's always propaganda, there's all kinds of factors that are flying around in real time, and it's really hard to be kind of like a grassroots network that has the discipline, coordination, communication, to be able to get on the front foot against a dictatorship that's backed by a tax system, that's backed by foreign superpowers, that's backed by a military and has all kinds of sanctions and laws, So it is like, I'm being pretty geeky here, but it is this kind of stuff has to be approached with the same tenacity and seriousness as somebody who goes to that U.S. Army War College for I don't know how many years and studies war, studies how to kill people, how to suppress dissent, how to control messaging and propaganda, So usually when this network that I'm a part of has a training, I haven't been to many of these trainings for quite some time, but I remember we had some comrades that we were training in one of the countries that neighbors Uganda, and I don't want to say too much on a podcast, but basically they were in the middle of a session, kind of like a workshop session, and there was all this kind of banter in the room, and things were kind of getting out of control, and somebody was just like, look, do you think it's okay for somebody who is in the military to show up a minute late and then to talk on different subjects during this period of time? So if we don't have the same discipline and strategy, then we're going to lose. And I do think I know that's kind of they're just saying that to prove a point, to get people to kind of come back to order and work together and all that. But there is a grain of truth to this idea that you can't just jump into a very hostile, repressive environment that is shifting so much all the time and just kind of expect to win because you do nonviolence or because you have many people. There are so many factors that are always kind of at play, and so that's what I want to, that's what gets me going. I really get excited about contributing my life toward understanding that better and toward being in solidarity with people that are already waging their own struggles. This gets back to the whole liberating ourselves from our privilege as well. I want to learn from these groups, and I have that beautiful opportunity to do so, and a sort of unique privilege in terms of the relationships that I have to share with people. Well, what did they really try in Sudan to get al-Bashir out of power, and how might that work for us here? Or maybe it doesn't. It's to me, that's an enormous privilege to be able to kind of learn from those experiences.
So what were some of the things that were going on when you were with Solidarity Uganda and you're trying to resist the government oppression? Excuse me. What was the government doing that you were able to respond to? What were the types of things that you were responding to in the community that you were part of, and the community that you were trying to help, along with other Ugandans, mobilize?
Yeah, so a number of things. Trying to think. I mean, there are just so many of successful and failed attempts at undermining the dictatorship.
Sure. You can speak to it
its
generally too.
Private sector allies. Yeah, no. One thing that is just running rampant in Uganda and many parts of the world is land grabbing by either the state or by really like wealthy private sector investors or multinational companies, whether it's for resources, like mining or oil or even land to cultivate, or for kind of like development, like developing like hotels or urban development of some kind. There's this theft of land that is really running rampant in Uganda and other places, and this is something that we noticed very early on motivates people to struggle. And we decided that we don't want to fight for people, we want to fight with them. So we don't want to convince communities to engage in resistance, that's their decision. But if they have decided that, and there's something that we could offer and something that we could learn from there, then potentially these could be good partners. So we started our kind of journey in a district called Amuru, which had been subjected to lots of like what they call large scale land grabbing, like imagine 100,000 acres of land, like the size of maybe one of the smaller counties in my home state. An a single investor comes and says, this land is mine. And yet thousands of families live there and rely on it. You're talking about an agrarian society. They rely on it, and it's part of their identity. For hundreds of years, generation after generation, ancestors have done everything that's meaningful in that place, and they're buried there with you, So your community not only sort of relies on it economically, but it's a part of who they are. And so some investors wanted such a large swath of land in this particular district, and the military had been sent to forcefully evict people, which they had done on several occasions. Some sort of like community vigilante groups were armed and committed arsons on behalf of the investors and politicians that were trying to take over this land. So we worked with this community that had already engaged in direct action, like very serious resistance. They had already done so many defiant actions against the dictator and his allies. So we worked with this group to build up community organizing structures and resistance training kind of programs, and develop some tactics that could be used to thwart the militarism and violence and injustices that basically catalyze this land grab. One of the actions that these are protracted struggles often. This one has been many years, even before we were kind of involved at all. But in a few years ago, they had over 300 women, men, and children that went to occupy a United Nations office, basically calling upon the UN to engage the government in dialogue. Very modest request to stop the land grabbing and the violence associated with it. And this did at least temporarily make like the arsons and forced evictions subside. The story is not finished being told. But some of these kind of things, like, really put us on the map within East Africa. And so we get a lot of, and other parts of Africa as well. So we get a lot of requests, communities will say, hey, we've been trying ABCD, it hasn't really worked. We want to get to know you and build our power together. Will you come and be with us in our struggle? Yeah, so that's kind of like, I think, that at this point, like the requests are coming in the door for that kind of thing, and it's more like the only thing we can really do capacity wise is to say, like, have you already tried ABCD? Like, if you haven't tried that, there's not much we can help with yet. So the group that I was a part of and still am in some ways, like, really wants to see that there's some resistance that has been tried, and if it has, then that's a community that we want to be in solidarity with.
So basically, like, you've got limited resources, you have a lot of requests coming in, you are looking for a commitment level from the people who are asking for help. Like, hey, have you done some of these basic steps first? And if so, then we're the logical next step, and we'll put some pressure. What's the is there is there a threat of this stuff spilling over into violence, like, on a regular basis, or is that something that's just, I mean, I feel like we've seen that happen from afar in a lot of different countries over the years, and it's like you push people to a certain point, naturally you're going to start to see, violent outbursts and stuff. Is that something that you guys have to combat, or is that not a factor in the areas that you're working in?
People will fight with the tools that they have. And because violence is, I want to be careful how I say this. Like, violence isn't the only thing that's taught, but it is one of the things that's often taught. And so people will try to sometimes use violence. I think where Solidarity Uganda comes in on that is to discuss strategy. Not so much like ethics or morality per se, which is for a community to decide, but strategy. And, if you, like, for example, one community had fought with, they had used stones, essentially stones and spears, and the state has tear gas, AK-47s, vehicles, all kinds of stuff, and in nearly unlimited supply. So it's not to say that you could never win in that situation, but it's going to be a heavy lift,
Yeah, for sure.
It's harder to suppress nonviolent resistance in some ways. Not always. There's also really ineffective, uncreative, unstrategic nonviolent action that is done all over the world, where you guys come from, where I live, everywhere. And occasionally, some people can devise like a pretty strategic approach. And so that's where Solidarity Uganda would try to, ally with communities, is to build capacity around that strategizing, the ability to organize using tactics that will get you the kind of power that you want, instead of pushing you backwards. Violence doesn't always push you backwards, but it often does when you're against these powerful opponents.
So much of the, like, when you're ultimate goal, it sounds like, is to depose this dictatorship, and probably, I would imagine, you want to reorganize the government to some extent so that this situation doesn't occur again right after this guy leaves power. How much of that is dependent upon getting the international community to pay attention to what's going on there? And I guess I don't know. It seems like such a big undertaking. It's like it's hard to wrap my head around, like, how that could take place and what would be required to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a friend of mine says that the cost of a no is a yes. So in other words, like, everything that you're resisting, you have to provide an alternative, or at least somebody has to. And I do get very disillusioned in our kind of like formal opposition partisan politics within Uganda, also within the US. I'm not particularly stoked about the Democratic Party. Count me out for any party of the right altogether. The Democratic Party is basically center right in my kind of view of things. And I get frustrated in Uganda with the opposition because it repeats its own mistakes a lot, season after season. There's a lot of personality cults, misogyny. They're really kind of like these internal things that keep paralyzing them. And if you look in the research about, if you dig up research about civil resistance, nonviolent resistance, nonviolent revolutions, you will often, find that the factors that determine whether or not a movement wins have very little to do with context or contextual factors like the level of repression, how much money the movement has, that kind of stuff, and have a lot to do with how is that movement building its power. Those three things that I mentioned. Does it have a nonviolent strategy? Does it do strategic planning and then implement that plan? Does it build unity amidst diversity and get these diverse constituencies to take action in some way? Those are internal factors that even in some of the most repressive environments, groups usually have control over those, or at least some level of control over those. Maybe that's based on research, but then I think for me personally, like, even if that wasn't the case, I would prefer to remain willfully naive so that I could still have hope.
One of the things that you mentioned was, with this kind of work, you do build a name for yourself in a way or Solidarity Uganda builds a name for itself as a community organizing group, and you get people reaching out to you. I imagine that also, it puts you on the map a little bit with, the government or the government militia. I don't know if militia is the right word, but like the military. It sounds like, from my understanding, that some of them kind of operate like kind of mob-ish in that, yeah, they all take orders from the government, but they kind of operate within an area and kind of do their thing and might break the quote unquote rules. But you must have, you did, if the community knows who Solidarity Uganda is and they're reaching out in strategy, then I assume that made some enemies too. And I know that you personally know plenty of people who've had faced repercussions for that. And I'd love for you to kind of share some of that part of your story too. I feel like we're going to be, this is going to be a little bit longer than our usual conversations. And I feel like we're just scratching the surface here, but I want you to kind of get into what that looked like and what making that name, what Solidarity Uganda making its name for itself did, and what type of repercussions happened as a result of it.
Yeah. So I haven't worked with Solidarity Uganda, just for a disclaimer, since 2019. I still have plenty of comrades and friends and fellow organizers and co-trainers and people that I've worked with within that family. Not all of them would say, we're fighting the dictator. I know a few of them definitely would, and others would say, we're resisting land grabs, we're resisting patriarchy, we're resisting ABCD, and trying to build up a world that's more based on X,
Sure, that makes sense.
So, I want to, I don't know if I'm clever enough, but I would love to find a way to bring this back to the discussion of Christianity. And if that comes up, please, kind of nudge me in that direction, because in my own experience with this work, it did kind of, I was already sort of on the path, but it resulted, in a crisis of faith eventually. I think when you go through trauma, psychologists will tell you, when you go through trauma, there's often a crisis of faith. And so, it's also maybe a little bit of a trigger warning. I will be happy to talk about my traumas, at least with some level of transparency. I'm already trying to maybe beat around the bush on a few things, because haven't, talked with the comrades about what I'm going to be sharing with you guys and who might listen to this podcast, and that kind of stuff. But I can share one experience from 2014. So a group in northern Uganda of youth and women had convened to basically discuss strategies for weeding out the corruption in the health sector within one of the towns called Lira. And during that training, 5 of us were arrested. I won't kind of like share the whole story. We were detained for 6 days on, which is longer than the legal amount of days in Uganda. And transferred to torture facilities and this kind of stuff. And I think at that point in my faith, and even in detention, like I had very vivid and even kind of like prophetic dreams and visions, and I felt very guided and very grounded in what I knew as the truth, and when I would be called in for interrogations or something, like I had this like inner peace or calm that I feel was rooted in what I believed about not just nonviolent strategy, but more of the Gandhian soul force, like this sort of like stubborn idea that like the most powerful thing is soul or is love or whatever this truth is that is transcendent, So I felt really grounded.
I just want to jump in and kind of define the truth a little bit that you're talking about in regards to a faith shift and things like that. That truth had moved from like as our evangelical upbringing would consider the highest honor in some sense would be being persecuted for the gospel, which there are plenty of Christians involved in nonviolent work across the world, and who have been throughout history. And you can even, I guess the first one that jumps to mind would be like juniors who have that faith component to their non-resistance. But like when you think of things like that, like were you at that point, was that truth wrapped up in a Christian narrative still, or is that the point in which or around that time that truth had started to diverge from a Christian narrative?
That's a good question. And I mean, hearing your guys' questions like kind of makes all of my theology nerd, like antennas go up. And I just want to kind of like go down so many different rabbit trails. I mean, at that point, I had pretty well deconstructed evangelicalism, and at least some forms of American Christianity, including kind of like mainline Protestantism, because I was comparing that to my experience in the Church of Uganda, where I was still a member at that time. So I think, yes, like it did give like a preferential treatment to like Christian truth, maybe without going into too much detail. Like my worldview definitely centered, or my perception of truth centered Jesus at that point. Yeah. Okay. Although I think my Jesus looked different than basically, 99% of the people that I knew. So yeah, I mean, it was sort of like stubbornly Christian, but I had a bone to pick with Christians more than I did with non-Christians.
Sure. That resonates with me a lot. I see. I think you've shifted from there at that point, but that's still a sentiment that I feel strongly. So I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, and the more I grow up, the more I kind of realize, like, okay, like I really don't care that much. I mean, it is frustrating, the hypocrisy and Christianity. It's also just like human institutions and hypocrisy. So I'm not so like pissed off that, oh, you're a Christian and you're a hypocrite. Maybe there's like a unique, kind of Christian hypocrisy compared to other hypocrisies, but that stuff doesn't bother me. I don't want anybody to be like, I'm not advocating that somebody embraces my Jesus over theirs at this point in my life. But at that point I was pretty zealous about that. Even in under interrogation at one point, there was basically an officer going on and on and on about just how I'm a bad person and all this kind of stuff, and I pulled out all kinds of like Christian stuff. I don't know. I can't deny that it felt like it came to me in this very transcendent way, you know. But you know, a few weeks after our release, and you know, we had a court case that we got basically harassed with for years after that, before it was finally dismissed. And you know, thousands of dollars of things taken from us, people following us in public, etc., wiretapping, all that shit. So, but a few weeks after our release, you know, my passport had been confiscated and stuff, and I'm like, you know, I don't want to share this whole story with you because it might be incriminating to myself. But I'll just say that, like, playing the Christian card, you know, wearing the right T-shirt or whatever has really helped me, you know, in my journey. So I started to sort of like, because Uganda is a very, very Christian society. It's by far the majority of the population is Christian. I mean, Christianity in the global south is more on the rise, whereas in the north it's on the decline. And you know, Africa in particular is quite Christian. If you're not Christian, you're usually still theistic. You're like a Muslim or something. You know, there are a few. There's Catholics, Protestants, which are basically Anglicans, and Pentecostals. Those are kind of like the three. You know, those three populations are the majority of Christians within Uganda. So yeah, I mean, it's a very Christian society. Our neighbors sing Christian songs when we have non-religious meetings, like to get together or a birthday party or whatever. And to some extent, I think if you, maybe if you're listening as a leftist and you've adopted historical materialism, you just, you know, you can flex this muscle of like just embracing the thing around you, you know, acknowledging that people have their lived experiences, and it's an act of love often to be a part of those. It can be an act of love to challenge those things as well. But, you know, like at some point after being released, I was like, this is ridiculous. Like I'm in this perpetual balancing act. Like the church is in bed with the regime. I'm against the regime and I'm still in the church. Like this, like something doesn't compute here, and it's going to be way more difficult to like continue to do that balancing act. I don't get anything from the church in terms of support in this. In fact, I get people dissuading me from participating in what is good and right and just. So at some point I'm like, okay, maybe I should just like use it opportunistically, you know, like if I need something from someone and I know that the Christian card can help me, I'm going to play it, you know, I'm going to use the Jedi mind trick, you know, like I'm just going to be whoever I want to be at any particular moment. Shape-shifting kind of, you know, I took on this kind of shape-shifting worldview when it came to kind of like maneuvering and, you know, getting the results that I wanted. Not to say that I was ever dishonest. I won't admit that publicly on a podcast, but you know, I definitely had this new kind of spirituality, which was weird because you think of religion as serving the thing that you believe in, the truth, the love, the God, etc., that you believe in. And now I was starting to think like, maybe it can serve me, you know?
Sure.
And, you know, I justify that in my own ethics as like, okay, I'm trying to serve the greater good here, my community, not only myself. And those kind of questions led me to a lot of like ecofeminist writing, and Black feminist writers. And I think, you know, once I got into them, I was like, okay, now I've found like that thing that really resonates with my heart. I'm going to make choices in my life that are in accordance with this. I still, you know, sometimes I miss like the kind of rigid dogma, you know, of my upbringing. Like these are the right answers. It creates a kind of comfort and clarity. But I you know, it's not true. I haven't found it to be true. And I also think that rationally it's not true.
It sounds like what you're saying is that, and you can, I mean, correct where you need to, but what I'm hearing, I guess, that like what you've come to terms with as the truth, it might be represented in various ways through various traditions, and you've seen aspects of that truth in Christianity, and you've seen untruth in you've whatever it may be through just organization and action, you've found that same truth through the outcomes that you believe in. You've found people who are participating in what you consider to be the truth. So when you're in an environment in which you can use a language that, one, you're familiar with, two, the culture is completely embedded with, that explaining that truth and working and unifying people around it can be done authentically through a language that's familiar to the people, and that language happens to be Christianity. Does that sound right? Am I following you?
I don't want to say no or yes, but I want to.
Okay.
I want to. I think what I'm getting at here is that I am okay with the not knowing.
Yep.
And there are some things that I think I do know, and that many humans have the experience and access to know, that we should latch onto. I don't think like all particularities or all religions are, equal or sort of like equivalent or interchangeable. And, therefore, we can sort of just like replace the language across the board, to get to the same kind of destination. Maybe there is some truth in that, but I just don't want to kind of like accept that too easily and oversimplify it. I think that's how I would respond to that.
Okay. So I feel like we should get to, I mean, I know you said you left Solidarity Uganda in 2019. I don't want to miss out on what you kind of got going on now. And I think it's worth spending a few more minutes on that. So after, what was your reason for, and I know you said you're still, you're not disconnected from it completely, and then you have a lot of camaraderie with people who are part of it, and that you still are in those types of conversations. But what led to your leaving it in an official capacity, and then what did that lead you to?
Well, what led me to leaving it was that I had, I guess by then, a new relationship. Like I had been in a relationship with someone for a few years, and, it was continuing, this work was continuing to affect my mental health in a very negative way. And I also felt like I had made a contribution that I could walk away from and it wouldn't just collapse, Okay. I'd been pretty foundational in like building up an organization that could sustain itself in terms of the organizational culture and mission and goals and strategy and finances, etc. And at a certain point, like I knew that handing that off was definitely the right thing to do. With those kind of things, you don't want to like linger around too long. You want to give power to people that have the ability, maybe even more than myself, to carry things forward. And they really have done so in the past few years. So I was in this new relationship, and I just knew that like that thing that lives inside me, that's really me, I wasn't going to be able to find it in that work context anymore. Like I think I kind of found it, and then I peaked, and I was kind of like ready for the next challenge, and ready to also take care of myself. So I decided to, I'd already done a little bit of like freelance writing, freelance consulting, freelance like movement teaching, training, that kind of stuff. So I decided to kind of like just do that, like just pick up random side gigs to support our family. and also, continue to do something that I liked, but without the sort of like intimate, personal attachment. Something that I could walk away from at the end of the day. And, when people are arrested, like I'm confident that there are systems that have been put in place. And, when there are these sort of like political crises and that kind of thing, like I wouldn't be anxious or worried and, up at night and that kind of thing. So at some point, I did it as a healthy decision for myself. I picked up, maybe if you want to include any of these links in the show notes, like I've done quite a bit of work with a group called Beautiful Trouble that does similar kinds of like movement support, but on a global scale and with some fun, exciting, pranky kind of tools. I've supported various kind of coalitions and trade unions. And I've decided to do these things like on a sliding scale, so if it's in my home community, like there are many things that I'll do for free. If it's for like a big, like Amnesty International or one of these huge organizations, like I'll charge something for it on the heavier side. And if it's a smaller client, maybe something in between, So that's basically how I've been sustaining myself. But what I really want to do is make enough money to kind of like say, okay, basic expenses like work hours as I know it. Let's put them aside for like 2 years, and support my partner's film. She's got this excellent film about a very fascinating subject called Dr. Stella Nyanzi, who is this. She's many things. She's a former political prisoner. She's a vulgar poet. She's an academic, like a feminist academic. She studies health and sexuality and African sexualities, and she's been one of the most fierce people in Uganda standing against the dictatorship. So my partner is working on a film about Stella Nyanzi.
I imagine that type of thing is met with controversy. I mean, there's a level of controversy around what it sounds like you're describing this as, maybe even in the States when it comes to vulgarity. But it sounds like that's a very particular tool to be used in Uganda. Is that something that's true, untrue? Yeah.
So, I mean, you can if you look up anything about now I'm making a pitch for Stella Nyanzi on your podcast. If you look up anything about Stella Nyanzi and rudeness, you'll find all kinds of like academic treatises. You'll find her poems, one of which, like landed her in prison because she posted a poem on Facebook. So she was in prison for 2 years.
Wow.
But there is like a unique Ugandanness or Chiganda, I don't know what the correct word is, ness for the way that she uses vulgarity and rudeness and nudity and this kind of stuff to challenge the dictator's power, to even, affect the dictator in a negative way, to attack the dictator. So definitely, I encourage folks to do a little bit more digging about that. It's very interesting. The film is called "The Woman Who Poked the Leopard."
Okay.
There's a thing that Museveni says that you shouldn't poke the leopard's anus, referring to himself as the leopard. And Stella,
oh, come on, you're telling me
to poke his anus over and over. But funny. Yeah, just a very, very inspiring, I think like a life-giving project in the end. So I don't know. I don't know if circumstances of life will enable me to kind of step away and, I don't know, give any kind of like background support, even if it's just as, do the cooking at home and make sure the kids are fine and all that. But I just need a break. I want to be kind of like a dad and more present and more faithful to my own interests, listen to music more, that kind of stuff. That's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, after a decade of, investing yourself into challenging systems of authority and mobilizing and, the stress that brings on, and even the fear and of some of the trauma that you've dealt with it, I imagine that being able to support it from a distance or support art that's doing something that you find meaningful in the way that you just described would be very welcome for you.
If anybody is listening that has trauma, be it, kind of like religious trauma that, from your youth, or political trauma or whatever kinds of trauma, I really encourage undertaking EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. For me, that's been like one form of psychological support that has really enabled me to get back in my own body and rediscover who I am and reclaim what I've lost.
I've heard a little bit about that. I mean, I don't know that now's the time to get into what that is or all the science behind it, but that is something that it sounds like that's a growing in popularity when it comes to recovering from traumatic experience.
Yeah, I've heard the name come up several times here recently too.
It's used for many things, even performance anxiety. If you don't do well on exams because you can't focus, all kinds of stuff. Yeah. I feel like what I would love from you guys is this conversation took such a serious turn, and I mean, y'all make fun of Christianity so much and so well, and I want to do that with you before we get off the
phone. We robbed you of your chance to make fun of something. Oh, I'm so sorry. I feel bad. It did take a serious tone. I think your story is so incredible and fascinating. It's Phil, you're like someone who, it's weird. There's not often those people who bridge a gap between people that you have like a lot of respect for, that you look up to, that you learn a lot from, that also can simultaneously be your friends. And you do like kind of bridge that gap. And so I wanted to get into your story because I think it's done a lot for me in helping even me grow in my beliefs and seeing how what's important to you has affected your life and the way it's changed you. I just get that little serious point out of the way. I also failed to note at the beginning when we were talking that speaking of just being friends, right? And even though you're someone who I love to hear from and pick your brain on important topics, you're also someone who, recently you were visiting New York, and I told that story about being at a bar in New York and doing a spit take on a whole bunch of strangers, all over their faces and food, and horribly embarrassed myself. And you were there with me on that. We were visiting you in New York while you were here. And, I'm glad that you were there for that.
Yeah, that was beautiful. I think the spitting was beautiful, but also like what happened afterward, you were just like, I'm so sorry. And you couldn't stop apologizing. And then I think you bought them like a round or something. That was wonderful. To me, new appetizer. Yeah. So I think, a big ditto to everything, all the bromance that you're putting out there. One very bromantic thing that we did together was 11th Commandment News. We created The Onion for, making fun of like American evangelicalism, which I think I threw it up on like WordPress or something and then didn't back up anything. And so like when the domain name got canceled, like we lost everything or something. But
I recently mentioned, and I said it ambiguously on a previous guest. I think it was when I don't remember, maybe Scott Rogers, but we were, Dan Kozu maybe, but we had talked about.
You were saying you were like the Babylon Bee.
Yeah, we were like it. No, but we had started that, and then Babylon Bee started pumping out all their shit, and we were like, and that's when Babylon Bee didn't come. Their true colors hadn't shown yet. And they would just seemed like they were just joking on Christian culture before they turned into like obviously just more right-wing comedy. It's gross and boring. But that, so I mentioned that previously. That was it, and that was fun. I feel like now with Babylon Bee going so poorly, this is something that should have a bit of a
somebody needs to do it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it would be great if we knew anybody that had a podcast that was about growing up Christian.
Yeah, we might be able to get some content out there. Maybe we need to put out the word, start a group for people pushing headlines, getting edgy with it.
You just make the fake headlines because nobody reads the articles anyways.
Yeah, I mean, The Onion has been doing that for generations, right?
Oh,
Just like, 200-word articles. It's all about the headline.
Yeah, it is. It the amount of times that people don't actually click into the article. And so there's a lot of funny stuff in the articles sometimes too.
Yeah.
You're usually just scrolling through Facebook or passing by and you go, well, that's funny. And then you're like, maybe I'll read that later. And then you definitely won't. So we should, if we do this, we need to put a lot more work into our headlines than we do our articles. Maybe even throw in some trolling comments about how it's clear that people aren't reading the articles.
So it becomes that little gem that somebody finds on the internet.
Yeah,
and they're just like, who are these guys that like, they're so pretentious, they just think they're so funny that they have to troll themselves just so that I find it like 5 years later.
Yeah.
My favorite headline, I think, was one that Jesse made, which was high school teen blesses congregation with 11-minute spirit-led guitar solo.
Yeah.
Oh, kill me.
Yeah. That was a good one. We had one about feeling the Holy Spirit while spanking your children too. Was one of them. I wish we could recall more than we had. I only recall two at this.
I think we probably have a thread somewhere where some of it lives still.
I know.
In the archives. Zuckerberg archives.
Maybe we got to bring it back. I think there's a lot to offer here, especially now. I mean, with the growing disillusionment of Christianity with millennials, it's and Gen Zers, the irreverence is taken well now, particularly. So the more
Casey, what about Wichita? What's like the most ironic or disgusting kind of Christian trend around you?
Oh boy. Well, there's those big hats that women wear, like the brunch girl hat. I don't know if that's a Christian thing, but I don't like it.
Is it the head covering?
No, there was so here's a good one. So Wichita has, and really anywhere out here, I mean, this is a grain belt. There's these huge grain elevators all over the place here, right? They're massive, and they store grain of different varieties in these things. And then, they're always next to a train yard so they can pump them in train cars and out they go. And I don't know if all of them are still in use nowadays or if some of them are shut down or what, who knows? Anyways, they're just like these massive monstrosities that you can see from miles and miles away. I mean, they're the tallest structures by far. And so one of the ones that's well within view of downtown and pretty much anywhere else in Wichita, you get above like third story elevation, you're going to see this thing. They decided to, Wichita's like really put a lot of effort and money and stuff into cleaning the place up and really, bringing in more businesses and stuff. It's really good overall. They decided that they were going to do a giant mural on the side of this grain elevator, which, that's a big undertaking. It's a big. So they brought in, I don't know what the selection process was like or something, but they hired this Latino guy who's an artist to do the painting and, design the artwork and then oversee the painting of this mural and everything. And it was kind of like an ode to the, Central and South American immigrants and stuff that built large portions of the railroad in this part of the country, like in the 1800s and stuff, which was pretty cool. I thought, I mean, it seems like just a very non-controversial way to honor people who are built part of the community that we're in, and people lost their minds.
What?
Because it was like what the articles and stuff that were originally written about it, like underscored the fact that they were, it was immigrant workers that built this thing and it was to honor them and stuff. And they're like, they should be honoring American workers, Americans. And it was the dumbest thing. It was like, I would have loved to have cornered a bunch of the people complaining and just be like, what era do you think this was talking about? Like, do you have any ideas? Because I guarantee you all of them thought they were talking about like 1984 or something like that. You know? But it was funny, like seeing posts about it on Facebook and stuff, and just seeing like I had a guy who routinely solicits my company for donations and support and stuff for like local charity things that they do and stuff. They do like, I guess I better keep it vague. Anyways, this guy popped up on Facebook with like this super America's going to hell, and this is where the leftists want to take the country over a mural. I was like, don't come asking me for donations. I know who you are now. So like dumb.
Pretty classic.
It's a cool mural. You probably look it up on Google Images, I would imagine.
I'll ask you for a link later.
Yeah. All right, Phil, I want to know if you have anything to anything to part ways with us with. Final words before we close it out here. I feel like we've been talking for a minute, but is there anything that you would like to share with us before we close out? Links, that stuff, that places people can follow you, or just general sentiments?
Oh, I'm pretty bad at social media. I'm probably going to kick myself later and be like, oh, I should have told people to follow me here.
Well, we got time later. If you throw it to us, we'll put it in the show notes. You mentioned Beautiful Trouble. It sounds like they're doing some cool work. I don't know.
I've plugged a lot of things that I didn't really come here to plug, but I don't know. I'm happy to, I guess basically I would like to chat with anybody that wants to talk about, how they've gone through their evangelical, journey and what it's meant for them. And if you want to make fun of, Awana or whatever with me, like I'm really open to that stuff. It gives me a good laugh. It's very healing. I mean, you can share any of those links. Yeah. But I just want to say that I appreciate you guys. I like this show. It's like one of my go-to podcasts when I get the time. I can't listen to all, but I'm selective, and you have some great ones there. You have some really interesting people on the show. I get a great laugh every now and then. I think it's also, it's something that's healing for people to know that they're not alone in, questioning what they've been taught, what they've grown up with. And also, man, like the 90s and early 2000s is just like a weird time.
Yeah.
Just really weird, really weird. And to just like reflect on it and be like, wait, that was also within my lifetime as a young person. It's just really interesting. And much appreciation.
Well,
thanks for having me on, guys.
Yeah, thanks for hanging out with us, Phil. Sorry we went too serious, but maybe
no, not at all. Not at all.
And make fun of some stuff. Maybe once we restart our 11th Commandment news, we'll have to do an episode of headlines.
Yeah, well, I'm glad the tech worked for us also.
I know. This has been a long time in the making.
All right, everybody. Well, thanks for listening, and we will catch you next time.